So strategy. And we hear that word a lot. You know, strategic, we're going to do strategic planning, that's our strategy, that's business. But really strategy, it's not easy to do, and it needs to be planned. So when you're talking about business strategy, there's a lot of work that needs to happen before you can get to sort of this whole, let's get together in a room and let's create some long-term and short-term goals. So what we have here, on one side, to get started, is this whole concept I talked earlier about, you know, clear vision. Understanding what your mission, your purpose, your core values are in the organization. You know, what are the values of your company? What are the guiding principles that support your mission and your mission statement? That needs to be, that's paramount. You gotta have that. The outcome of having that, when you go through this, is creating your vision, your short-term and your long-term goals for your organization. So to get here, though, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. So let's start with what am I talking about here? You know, organizational assessment. Before you can get up to where you're heading, you really need to look internally. You know, and the companies do that. I've done that before. You do what's called SWOT analysis of your organization. You know, internally, how, you know, what is it about your organization? How are your people? How are they being trained? You know, do you have the right people in the right place? You know, we're talking about architecture. Do you have the right process and systems? You know, one of the exercises I do with CEOs is I have them draw up their organizational structure with the names of the people. And then I say, all right, can you, on a scale of 1 to 10, let's go over here and let's sort of assess your leadership team and your second tier team. And by the time we're done, we look back and I've, you know, we get 6s and 7s and 5s and 8s. And I said, and you say you want to do what? You want to double in size in the next 3 years with this group of people. So you really need to understand if you really have the right people in your organization to take it where you want to go. Right? How about your operations? And we're going to talk more when we talk to industry. You know, are you using, you know, the latest and greatest stuff? You know, if you're manufacturing, you know, you're doing Six Sigma and Lean and 5S. I'll go a little bit into that, more into that in a minute. You know, project management, ERP, you know, enterprise resource planning. Are you doing any of that? You know, how are your operations? How efficient are you? Your customers. Do you have a clear understanding, and do they know you well? And do you know, this is an exercise that I'll suggest, you know, you guys do. You know, go back and do, you know, list your top 10 clients by revenue. And then list your top 10 clients by profitability. And then go back and do a self-examination as to who you spend your time with. Are you spending your time with your top 10 clients or your top 5 clients, or are you spending your time with your best friends? Because I did that. I spent my time with some of my best friends who were giving me work, but at the end of the day, we're probably the worst clients. So I'm having a really clear understanding of who your customers are and spend time with them. And performance. And I'll go in depth on performance here when we talk about, you know, key performance indicators. So once again, these are 3 major components that we have to do before we get in a room to do true strategic planning. Okay, let's do, you know, gotta do analysis about your industry. How about your competitive analysis? Anybody heard of Porter's, you know, competitive analysis, or the 5 characteristics of that? You know, who's your, you know, what's your substitution? What are your substitutes? What's the, how hard is it to get into your business? Barriers to entry. If you're an engineer, what are the barriers to enter in engineering as an engineering company? Nothing, right? You got a license, you got a computer, you got software, you got an engineering company. What's the barrier to enter into a steel fabricating company? It's a whole different deal, right? You know, you got to buy lots of equipment. I mean, you know, lots of capital. You got to need space. You know, it's a big deal. So do you understand within your organization, within your market and your business, what are the barriers to entry? And then, you know, what kind of power does your consumers or your customers and your suppliers have in your organization? So you do that whole competitive, you know, that analysis. And also, do you know who your competitors are? What kind of market share do you have in the industry? I mean, what are they doing that you're not doing? Jack Welch was in the North Carolina CEO Forum last month. And he's talking about the, you know, the competition. He said, you know, I used to go to bed every night, always wondering, what is my competition coming up with that I'm not thinking about? And then what do I need to come up with that my competition is not thinking about? He said, you know, it's always that consuming thought, you know, about competitors. And we often think that, I don't care what my competitors do. Well, you know, it's true, but you need to know who your competitors are. I used to be that. I don't care what they're doing. You know what? They're there. I want to know what they are. Who won that? You know, so I didn't win the project. Who won it? Why? Go do the debriefing with the owner. You know, okay, so you selected so-and-so instead of our company. What did they have that we didn't have? Or what did we do that, you know, that you didn't like? And you know, and, if you're in the, both state and private clients will do that for you. Environmental forecast. I don't know what business you're in, but you always need to be thinking about what's going on outside your four walls that can have an effect on your business. And you know, let me give you an example. Going back to this company that rents cranes, huge cranes, and these are $4, $5, $6, $7 million cranes. And a lot of the cranes, they rent them in the wind industry, windmills, the West Coast. Well, the tax credits for this alternative energy had been on committee all year. So the windmill manufacturers have reduced their production. And in the United States, a lot of the developers of windmill farms have shifted their focus to Canada. So as an environmental forecast, if you're in that business, you need to pay attention to that. So you need to start going, and if you're just finding that out today, you may be out of business. You needed to be looking at this back 8 months ago and follow that trend of what that means to you. If you're in a business that is manufacturing, you know, what kind of outsourcing, offshoring? Their companies now are reshoring. Something to really think about. One of my clients in South Carolina, he's got a huge contract with Otis Elevator because they're reshoring some of the work that they were doing outside of the United States. And they're setting up a plant in South Carolina. That's the kind of, you know, environmental forecast we're talking about. What is it in your industry that's external to just what you typically do on a day-to-day that would have an effect on the future success of your business? Industry trends. What's your industry doing? You know, what are the things that's going on? You know, are they leasing equipment? Are they buying equipment? Are they is one's going back to offshoring or reshoring? What are the industry, you know, that you're involved with currently doing? Customer trends, supply chain. You know, what's are customers buying? Listen, if you're in the retail business, you know, and I know most of you guys are engineers, but I do this sort of workshop to multiple companies, and you know, where there's people, you know, from all kinds of industries. You know, if you're in the retail industry, you know, you have, you know, if you're just beginning to think about selling online, man, you know, you're so way behind. You see, customers are buying; they're having totally different buying processes now. You know, they're you know. They had, you know, you had Black Friday, but I think Monday, the sales on Monday was like phenomenal. You know, the online sales were just, you know, almost something like in the order of like $20 billion. In your supply chain, and I'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to operations. Thirdly, we talk about business intelligence. And this is more now looking internally to your organization. You know, start with economic logic. You know, how do you make money? You know, what's your price point? You know, what drives value to the bottom line? You know, if you are buying materials Would it make sense to buy more at certain times so you can get a better price? You know, so the whole concept of understanding within your organization how you make money is huge and important to stay in business. You know, what's margins can you live with and what margins you can't live with. Talk about differentiation and brand. You know, how do you become the red umbrella in the sea of black umbrellas? You know, if you're like everybody else, you know, then you drive it. Then you're competing purely on price. So the whole idea, and I mentioned earlier about you know, Blue Ocean, and I think, you know, just for the fun of it, you may want to consider looking at just doing that, because at least, perhaps, maybe you can come up with just a different way of doing something that you're doing within your organization. But in the exercise for Blue Ocean, basically what it tells us is draw the industry curve. If these are the factors that you compete on, right? Let's say you compete on price, you compete on quality, you compete on geography, you compete on service, whatever. And what level of offering do you have? This is the level of offering, right? So draw the industry curve. So let's say pricing is a big, you know, it's a big deal. So you do this, right? You do that. Okay, here's your industry curve. This is what the industry does. Then step back, draw your curve. What are you doing? Right? If all of a sudden you're doing this, guess what? You're doing what everybody else is doing. Very little differentiation. So, you know, so there's a process there by, you know, looking at how can you start, you know, increasing certain things, decreasing certain things, eliminating, you know, activities, adding stuff, so that somehow you can diverge your company curve from the industry curve. And I'm not saying that this is something that is easy to do. Actually, it's pretty hard to do. But if you go through this exercise, maybe you find out something within your organization that you can sort of modify and change it and give you a little bit of an advantage. And the companies have done that. Some companies have done totally just unbelievable what they've done in this arena. Cirque du Soleil. Anybody been to a Cirque du Soleil? You know, it's in Vegas, or, you know, I think they brought it here. You know, they're not even a circus and they're not theater, but it's a combination of both. And they've basically created their own market share. And there's all kinds of